Hello everyone. This is the last time that we're going to be meeting in this way, and I've been thinking a great deal about what to say about topic 7 in civilization. Certainly the amount of information that's in your book is positively huge. I'm not sure that Fagan does the best job in trying to organize the materials because, quite frankly, there's too much there. Any one of the civilizations that's discussed in the text could be covered in the studies of a lifetime. There is just so much material. But I've been giving it a lot of thought, and actually it just hasn't been over the past few weeks. It's been for a great part of my lifetime as a professional archaeologist. We can come up with lists of what defines a civilization. We can talk about individual circumstances, individual characteristics, interactions which promoted civilization in a particular part of the world at a particular time period. But I think that we need to look at civilization yet from another perspective entirely. In one of Fagan's earlier editions of this book, he actually brings up some ideas that Colin Renfrew had, and I think they only appeared in one volume and one edition, and then they disappeared. But I would like to bring them up as something for us to think about. Colin Renfrew was searching for the central idea of civilization and not its symptoms. By symptoms would be all those characteristics that Vera Gordon-Childe perhaps indicated, or the fact that you had trade, or the fact that you had chiefdoms rising up and turning into something else. I mean, all of these are described, I think, adequately in the chapter on the different theories of development of civilization. But he talks about the fact that we need to think about what civilization actually is as a way of life. He suggested that we should be seeking the flavor of civilization. We should be looking for its character or identity or personality. Now, that may seem a little bit vague, but think about the section where, in fact, it was in the previous section on early farmers, where Fagan mentions that the Nile Valley that we see today is nothing like the Nile Valley of many thousand years ago. It has now been essentially a man-remade environment, a culturally remade environment. And that's something that I've been thinking of for many years, the fact that human beings have created their own environment in the form of state-level society, in the form of civilization, if you want to call it that. For over 99% of human time, human beings have been very much subject to the impact of their environments, whether they be social or physical, but in many respects their physical environment. I'm not implying any kind of determinism here. I'm just saying that if you look through Fagan, he's constantly bringing up environmental factors which may have influenced certain events. And I think that those are very important, and certain changes, and those are very important. But when it comes to state-level society, when it comes to civilization, I think that we need to look at those words of Colin Renfrew from way back when, and maybe consider them a little bit more. He calls civilization a self-made environment of man, fashioned to insulate humanity from the primal environment of nature alone. Maybe that's an overstatement, but what is not an overstatement is that it is a self-made environment, and it is an environment that is constantly creating itself. It's a very dynamic kind of environment. Yes, civilizations rise and fall, but it is something that happens because of human beings primarily. I'm probably digging a hole here for myself, because I can think of droughts, and I can think of hurricanes, and over depletion of resources, and land and such, that so many variables that impact the decline of a civilization. But I can't get over the central idea that it is a human-made environment, and that's what Renfrew was trying to focus on. Now, in your book, and just to continue, it's a web of culture so complete or so complex that most, in fact, I should not say complete, but it is so complex that most of man's activities now relate to an artificial environment rather than the natural one. And I think that that is something for us to think about. It is not the answer to anything. It is not an answer. It is something to stimulate our thinking, especially as we try to understand our relationship today to the physical environment and how we impact each other. Fagin, I suppose one could interpret it in that fashion, but Fagin vaguely relates to this, and I'm going to read from my other computer. He says, economic, political, and social mechanisms affect people hundreds and thousands of miles away in the Iranian Plateau, the Indus, the Mediterranean, and the Nile Valley. And there he was talking about the Sumerian civilization. I think we could push that even further, that no doubt there were products perhaps from as far as China that were making their way across the Asian continent, and even making their way, if not directly, then through trade and retrade, all the way to the Roman Empire. So his point here is that what a civilization or a state-level society did, even the early ones, had an impact on others along the line, perhaps many thousands of miles removed, and that a state-level society needed to consider those other societies as well. Yes, they had to consider their own self-interest, but part of their self-interest was tied to their relationships to societies in other parts of the world. And that's something that we can all understand. When it comes to political action, a society such as ours must consider what is going on in other parts of the world. The various conferences that the presidents have in different parts of the world, G20 or G7. I run out of numbers at this point because they keep changing groups, but they're there to discover their mutual self-interest in the form of trade, in terms of relations, in terms of politics, and so on. And that doesn't have to do with so much how we are going to behave solo with respect to certain environmental factors, but how we behave together. And I think that this type of attitude, this willingness or need to think about what others are thinking down the line, even if they exist 1,000 miles away. I think this is an important part of civilization. You see me stumbling, but I'm always working on that idea. And so, again, it's a web of culture so complex. Most of man's activities now relate to an artificial environment rather than a natural one. And so Renfrew in his time was suggesting that in addition to everything else, we need to search for how and why humanity produced this man-made artificial environment, the one to which we are now adapted, the one which we tend to consider first above any other kind of environment. And on that note, if I've left you with a question, that's good, because it's not possible for any course to even begin to answer any of the questions. But if I leave you with some more questions to think about in the future, that's a good thing. It's been a pleasure, ladies and gentlemen. Take care. Bye-bye.